I opened the wrong door at the Clearwater Civic Center. That's it. No gunshot. No car crash. Just a squeaky brass handle, a light hum of a vending machine, and the low murmur of a voice I knew too well. I was looking for a breaker box. The main hall's overhead lights were out, half the vendors panicking. I'd been subcontracted for the event. Easy job, quick pay, local charity fundraiser. The kind of gig that doesn't take much thinking, just wires and sweat. I was wearing my name patch, still had drywall dust on my boots. And then I heard it. The amount's already wired. Everything's in place. No one's gonna trace it back. It was Evan, my wife's son. Not some junky whisper, not a jittery confession. Calm, measured, like he was reading from a list, like the danger belonged to someone else. He was sitting just out of view. I could see the edge of his shoulder, a ring of steam rising from a takeaway cup. His voice was steady, controlled. Too smooth for a kid I once bailed out of a drunk tank. I didn't walk in. I didn't breathe. I just stood there, 2 feet over the line, listening to the kind of thing a man isn't supposed to hear about someone he raised. There were other voices. Male. One younger, maybe early 20s, the other older. A laugh here and there. Someone said, clean. Another said, insurance. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't vague. It was a conversation that already had an outcome. Pre-decided. Sanitized. Like everything was already written down. And Evan, he didn't sound like someone trying to get away with something. He sounded like someone who already had. I backed out slowly. Shut the door as quiet as I could. No drama. No confrontation. I left the Civic Center before I even found the breaker box. Didn't sign out. Didn't collect the invoice. Just walked out, keys still in hand. My palms were sweating by the time I hit the truck. Not from fear. Not from guilt. From betrayal, that slow, grinding recognition that everything you built might be held together with tape. And worse, maybe nobody wanted you to notice. My name is Mark Collins. Electrician by trade. Husband by paper. Father by effort. 55 years old. Been married to Linda for 11. I met her at a church pancake breakfast. She made me laugh, which is rare for me. She was soft-spoken, the kind of woman who carried pain quietly. Said her first husband had been too wild to hold on to. That was all she offered. I never asked for more. Evan was 15 when I came into the picture. Lanky, sarcastic, all arms and neck like most teenage boys. He wore headphones like armor. Wouldn't look me in the eye. But I didn't push. I gave him space. Drove him to school. Sat in the car during football games. Paid for the braces his dad never covered. Bought him a used Civic when he turned 16. Worked weekends to get him into community college. Never asked for a thank you. Never got one either. I remember once, during his junior year, he left a printout on the kitchen counter. Tuition balance. Overdue. Linda didn't see it. I did. I covered it that same day. Cashier's check. Dropped it off during my lunch break. When Evan got home, I asked him how school was going. He grunted and said, "Fine. You don't have to act like you care." I laughed it off. That's the worst part. How many things I laughed off. The missed birthdays. The slammed doors. The way he still called his father Dad. Like the man hadn't gone radio silent after the divorce. The man hadn't sent a single Christmas card in 8 years. But Evan still wore the name like it was a badge of pride. Said he wanted nothing from me but distance. Linda would smile awkwardly, pat my hand. "He's just protective," she'd whisper. "He doesn't mean it." But what if he did? What if the resentment was never a phase? Just a quiet truth waiting to be spoken? What if I had built a life inside a house that never wanted me? I told myself for years that presence was enough. That a man doesn't need to be called dad to be one. That action speaks louder than blood. I told myself that my role was behind the curtain. Not center stage, not loud, just reliable. The bills got paid. The oil got changed. The lights stayed on. I showed love through labor, through patience, through the things I did, not the things I demanded. But maybe that's the lie we tell ourselves when no one's looking. Because when I stood in front of that door, Hearing Evan talk like he was prepping a crime scene. All of that came crashing down. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Like he knew I didn't matter. Like he knew I'd never walk in. Like my existence was so irrelevant, I wouldn't even get the courtesy of being feared. That's what gutted me. Not the words. Not the implications. But the certainty that nothing he did would ever come back to me. Because I was no one. That night, I sat in my truck outside our house for nearly an hour. Engine off. Lights out. I stared at the porch light I'd installed myself, back when we moved in. I remembered replacing the steps one summer when Evan tripped on a rotted plank. I remembered the roof leak I patched during a hurricane warning, while Linda stood inside, holding a bucket and crying because she thought we'd lose everything. I remembered repainting the guest room when Evan got engaged, because he said Rachel hated the color mauve. I did all that, me, and still I was the ghost. Dinner was on the table when I came in. Chicken, rice, Linda's soft humming in the kitchen. Evan wasn't home. Out late. Again. She asked if everything was okay. I said I was tired. She didn't press. She never did. That silence, her gift, her curse, had filled every crack in our marriage for years. And maybe I had mistaken that silence for support. Maybe I thought her quiet meant loyalty. But now I wasn't so sure. I looked at her that night, really looked, and wondered how much she didn't say. If she knew. If she'd always known. If, deep down, she believed that Evan had a right to dismiss me because I wasn't his real father. Maybe she didn't have to say it. Maybe her silence said it for her. I slept on the couch. Told her I had back pain. She brought me a pillow. Kissed my forehead. But the distance had already grown teeth. And as I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan I'd rewired myself, one question rang louder than the rest. If I disappeared, right now who would notice? Not mourn. Not miss. Just notice. Would Evan? Would Linda? Would Rachel? Or would they keep on walking? Stepping over the space where I used to stand. Grateful only for the silence? I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. Didn't demand answers. Didn't knock on the door I'd closed. That would have been loud. Messy. The kind of thing that gives people permission to make you the villain. For reacting. For raising your voice. For making them feel the consequences of what they started. No. I kept my hands steady. My eyes open. And I began the quiet process of erasing myself. That night, I logged into every account I had access to. Every system I'd kept running for years while Evan lived like the world owed him freedom. Joint bank access revoked. His health insurance removed. Credit card extension canceled. Emergency contact info updated. Phone plan reassigned. Car insurance restructured. Life insurance beneficiary changed. School loan unlinked. Utilities stripped down to my name and Linda's. No rage, just removal. Not one thing was done to punish. I wasn't interested in revenge. What I wanted was absence. I wanted him to know what it felt like when the invisible weight he leaned on was no longer under him. When the quiet support system he never acknowledged suddenly folded like air under his feet. I was meticulous. No emails. No alerts. Just the gentle unraveling of every rope I had tied to keep him afloat. It didn't take long to feel the shift. Like removing the beams inside a wall and waiting for the cracks to spread. The house stayed silent the next day. Linda went about her routines. Chores, her garden, those little humming sounds she makes when folding laundry. She didn't know yet. Not really, because I hadn't said anything. And that's what made it real. I wasn't telling anyone what I'd done. No declarations. No demands. Just subtraction. And that subtraction spread. By the end of the week, things started to crumble. A call came in from a florist, some wedding deposit overdue. Then the venue, they needed confirmation. Linda looked confused, her voice uncertain, covering the receiver with her palm as she whispered to me, "Did we forget to pay something?" I said, "No." Then I went back to my coffee. The cake decorator left a voicemail. Evan's fiancée, Rachel, messaged Linda, confused, then irritated. She said the hotel block wasn't reserved. That Evan had promised everything was under control. That He said Mark would handle it. That sentence kept repeating in my mind. Mark would handle it. Even now, months away from the wedding, I was still a shadow role. A man whose labor was expected but never named. They wanted my support like plumbing. Silent, hidden, and functioning. Not a man. Fixture. Rachel's tone changed when the calls stopped being returned. Linda started pacing. She made tea she didn't drink. She asked questions I didn't answer. And all the while I said nothing. Because nothing was owed. Not anymore. One night, around 10 p.m. Evan came through the front door, late as always, phone in hand, barking instructions to someone on the other end. Just resend the invoice. I'll have my guy take care of it. He turned the corner and saw me sitting at the dining table. Our eyes met. For a second, he hesitated. Then he gave me a nod. Not acknowledgement, just habit, and walked past me like I was drywall. That was the last breath of tolerance I had left. I stood up, went to the garage, and pulled down the black binder I kept in the file cabinet. It wasn't for drama. It wasn't a threat. It was record-keeping. Something I'd done for years, even when no one asked. Photocopies, statements, receipts, itemized support broken down month by month. 11 years of support, stacked in a 3-ring binder. Tuition, braces, gas money, court fines, rent deposits, car repairs, medical bills, engagement dinner, wedding venue, dress fittings, catering advance, decorations, photography down payment, each page dated, signed, my handwriting, my initials. On the first page I wrote a single sentence. Evan, you wanted me gone. This is what disappears when I am. The next morning, I left it on the kitchen counter. Closed. No ribbon. No note. Just truth bound and waiting. I left the house after that. Drove to work. Listened to talk radio. Took my lunch break under a tree and let the sun burn my arms. I didn't think about what would happen next, because I already knew. By the time I came home, the binder had been opened. Neighbors said Rachel came by. Said she screamed. Said she marched up and down the porch like someone robbed. One neighbor claimed Linda collapsed on the steps, crying, clutching the binder to her chest like it was a coffin. Evan didn't come home that night, and for the first time in over a decade, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Relief. Not because I'd hurt them, but because I'd finally stopped pretending I wasn't hurt. The silence in the house grew different after that. Heavier. Honest. No more humming. No more soft pats on the hand. Just the sound of someone realizing the foundation is gone, and the walls are still standing, but only for now. Linda asked me that night, "What's going on?" I said, "It's all in the binder." She didn't respond, because she knew. She'd known longer than she'd admit. She'd seen the tension, the way Evan rolled his eyes when I spoke, the way he disappeared when it was time to help, the way he never once, not once, called me anything other than Mark. She could have said something, could have drawn a line, but she didn't, and silence too is a choice. She started asking around after that, quietly at first, then more urgently. I heard her talking to her sister, to Rachel, to vendors, piecing together the slow unraveling I had already finished. She asked where the money had gone, why the cards weren't going through, why her son's name was no longer listed on the guest list confirmation emails. But she never asked me, not directly, because she knew the answer would come with a mirror, and she didn't want to see what she'd enabled. I didn't leave right away, not out of hope, out of process. You don't abandon a house in a storm. You wait. You secure what's yours. You exit clean. So I started moving pieces. A second bank account. A new P.O. box. Personal documents separated. I kept my wedding ring on, not out of love, but out of politeness. There were no fights, no slamming doors. Just a slow ghosting of a man who had already left the room. Took 3 weeks. 3 weeks for the wedding plans to fall apart. For the money to dry up. For Evan's voice to go from angry to desperate. For Rachel to threaten postponement. For Linda to stop humming completely. For the binder to be left untouched on the counter. Opened, stained with coffee. A single tear blotting the page with the venue invoice. I watched it all unfold like a movie I'd already seen. Because I'd lived the prequel for a decade. And the sequel was finally mine. The binder didn't scream. It didn't accuse. It didn't ask to be understood. It just sat there thick, black, unmoving, on the kitchen counter where Linda usually cut vegetables and Evan used to drop his keys without looking. I placed it carefully, squared to the edge, like something official, like a record, because that's what it was. Not emotion, not revenge. A ledger. I kept it for years without knowing why. Habit, maybe, or instinct. Electricians learn early that if something fails, you document everything before someone else decides it was your fault. Dates, amounts, signatures, proof. I never imagined the binder would become my voice. Inside were 11 years of quiet labor translated into paper. Tuition receipts stapled to bank statements. Copies of checks written when his father vanished again. Itemized lists of temporary help that somehow became permanent obligation. Every dollar traced. Every sacrifice legible. No adjectives. No explanations. Just facts lined up like witnesses who couldn't be intimidated. The first page was the only one written in ink instead of numbers. My handwriting. Careful. Calm. One sentence only. Evan, you wanted me gone. This is what disappears when I do. Nothing else needed saying. Rachel found it first. I wasn't there when she opened it, but I didn't need to be. I could imagine it clearly, the way she probably expected contracts, maybe seating charts, vendor confirmations. Instead, she found history. Found the spine of the life she thought was stable. Found out that the man she treated like background noise was the load-bearing wall. Neighbors filled in the rest later. Said Rachel's voice carried halfway down the block. Said she flipped pages so fast they tore at the rings. Said she kept asking, "Is this real?" Like reality might blink first. Linda didn't yell. That's what surprised everyone. She sat on the steps with the binder in her lap and cried quietly, like she used to when Evan was a child and scraped his knees. Only this time, there was no one left to comfort. Evan didn't come home. That absence spoke louder than anything he could have said. He didn't storm in. Didn't deny it. Didn't confront me. Because confrontation requires footing. And the binder had taken that from him. When he finally did call, it wasn't rage. It was logistics. "What the hell is this?" he asked, like I'd misplaced a receipt instead of dismantling his world. "It's accounting," I said. "You can't just leave that out." Rachel saw it. That was the point. Silence stretched thin on the line. Then his voice shifted. Not softer, just exposed. "You're trying to ruin my life." I looked around the house I'd paid for. The walls I'd fixed. The appliances I'd replaced one by one. And I realized something then. He truly believed that. That my absence was violence. That my presence had been an entitlement. "No," I said. "I'm letting it stand on its own." He hung up. The wedding collapsed in slow motion after that. Deposits forfeited. Dates pulled. Invitations paused mid-print. Every vendor wanted answers no one could give. Rachel stopped calling Linda. Her family stopped smiling. Evan stopped pretending control was something he'd ever had. And through all of it, the binder stayed where it was. Like a gravestone no one wanted to visit twice. Linda tried to talk to me 2 days later. She stood in the doorway of the living room like a guest who didn't know the rules anymore. She said my name the way someone tests ice. "You could have told me," she said. "I did," I answered. "For 11 years. She looked at me then, really looked, like she was seeing the outline of a man she'd erased piece by piece. She opened her mouth, closed it again. There was apology in her eyes. And something else. Calculation. Fear. The realization that support isn't permanent when it's never acknowledged. She asked if there was any way to fix it. I said, "You don't fix a foundation by asking the beam to come back after you've burned it." She cried harder then. Not loud. Just defeated. That night I slept without the fan on. Listened to the house breathe. Felt different. Hollowed. Honest. The binder didn't move. No one touched it again. Not Linda. Not Evan. It had already done its work. Said what I never could without being accused of bitterness. It showed them the cost of my silence, quantified, undeniable, irreversible. I didn't feel triumph. I felt finality. And for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anything alone. I moved out on a Tuesday. Not dramatic. No boxes stacked on the lawn. No goodbye speeches. I packed a duffel with clothes, my tools, documents, and the small things that were mine long before they were ours. The rest stayed where it was: furniture, dishes, memories. I didn't want souvenirs. I wanted distance. The rental was on the edge of town. 1 bedroom, thin walls, old carpet, a lamp I rewired myself because the switch was faulty and habits die hard. It was quiet in the way silence should be. No tension humming underneath. No waiting for the next slight. Just air and time. I slept better than I had in years. 3 weeks passed before Linda came by. She didn't call ahead. Just stood on the porch like someone waiting for a bus she wasn't sure would stop. I watched her through the window for a long moment before opening the door. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. She looked smaller. Tired. Like someone who finally understood the weight she'd been asking another person to carry. "I didn't think you'd go through with it," she said. "I did," I answered. She nodded slowly, like she was checking off something she'd hoped would stay theoretical. She stepped inside but didn't sit. Her eyes moved around the room, cataloging the absence of everything I used to be responsible for. After a while she said, "I just thought you'd fight harder." That landed heavier than anything Evan ever said, because it revealed the truth: she'd mistaken endurance for weakness, silence for consent. "I did," I told her, quietly, "for years." She cried then, not loud, not performative, just tears falling because the story she'd been telling herself no longer held together. She asked if we could talk, if we could try counseling, if there was still something to save. I looked at her and felt nothing sharp. No anger, no bitterness, just an understanding that some things don't break, they empty. "There's nothing left to negotiate," I said. "I'm done being the part no one names." She left shortly after. Didn't slam the door. Didn't argue. Just walked back down the steps and out of my life the same way she'd let me fade inside it. Quietly. That winter I bought a small house. 1 story. Solid wiring. No surprises behind the walls. I put my name on the mailbox. Just mine. No shared accounts. No silent expectations. I kept the place simple. Clean. Evan never reached out again. Neither did Rachel. I heard the wedding never happened. Heard he moved cities. Heard Linda sold the old house. Secondhand information travels fast when you stop being involved. Sometimes I think about that door at the Civic Center. About how 1 wrong turn showed me exactly where I stood. I don't regret opening it. I regret how long it took me to understand what I heard. They asked me to disappear, and I did. What they never understood was how much vanished with me. Not just money, not just stability, but the man who held everything together without being asked, without being thanked, without being seen. So tell me, was I wrong to stop carrying what no one acknowledged? Or would you have stayed silent too, until the weight finally crushed you?